I never knew exclusion could feel like a physical wound until my own daughter laughed at me over the phone. "Oh, we tied the knot last weekend. Just for real family." Her words punched through my chest like a bullet, leaving me standing in my credit union office, gripping the edge of my desk to stay upright. "Excuse me," I whispered, my voice suddenly foreign in my own throat. "Just for real family," she repeated, enunciating each syllable as if I hadn't heard her correctly the first time. As if the problem was my hearing, not her heart. I must have stood up too quickly because my desk chair squealed against the floor. The fluorescent lights in my office seemed to dim, the air thinning around me. 25 years of sacrifices, of nights spent checking fevers, of second jobs to pay for dance lessons, of co-signing for her dream home, all reduced to a single truth: I wasn't real family. I swallowed the stone in my throat. "I didn't say cut your mother," I managed finally. "It's not that," she responded, voice breezy as if we were discussing weekend plans. "We wanted peace. You ask so many questions, Anne." 3 days later, my phone lit up with her name. No hello, just panic crackling through the line. "The mortgage payment's late. Did you send it? Devon's sure you always send it the first of the month." They called. "Mom, call me." When I called back, her voice was shrill with fear. "Why would you do that? Do you know how that makes us look?" I let the silence stretch before answering with calculated calm. "Oh? I thought you knew." Sometimes love looks like protection. Sometimes protection looks like consequences. And sometimes, when your daughter excludes you from her wedding but expects you to keep paying her mortgage, both love and protection require you to stand your ground, even when your heart is breaking. My name is Denise Holloway, and this is the story of how I saved my daughter from a man who saw her house as collateral and her mother as an obstacle. It's about what happens when real family becomes a weapon, and why the most important papers in life aren't wedding certificates. They're the deeds and trusts that determine who owns what when love turns transactional. I've always measured my love by the things I didn't make my daughter worry about. That's how I thought mothering worked: the silent load-bearing, the way we shoulder the parts of life that would crush someone younger, smaller, less practiced. I did it for years without putting a name to it. Rent, tuition deposits, trips to urgent care at 2 in the morning for a fever she tried to pretend wasn't bad. I raised my daughter Raina in a little brick duplex on Masterson Avenue with the crooked lilac bush and the neighbor who used to shovel our steps before I could call him out for doing it. People in my church called me stubborn. People in my job at the credit union called me thorough. Both were true. You don't survive 18 years of raising a girl alone. Her father, Andre, drifting in and out like wind through a cracked window, unless you learn when to be soft and when to be steel. But how do you protect someone who thinks protection is control? How do you save a daughter who laughs at your exclusion? And what would you do if you discovered that your child's rushed wedding wasn't about love at all, but about a quitclaim deed being drafted behind your back? Women who aren't subscribed miss the warning signs I'm about to reveal. Don't be her. Because when I started digging into why my daughter suddenly needed to marry without me present, what I found made my blood run cold. From the time she was 11, Raina had a taste for beautiful things. She'd rearrange the living room every Saturday morning, throw a scarf over the lamp, pull leaves I hadn't noticed were there off the ficus, stand back and say, "It needs a story, Mom." She made a job out of it, interior styling. And at 25, with a portfolio of staged homes and one very successful Instagram page, she decided she was ready for a house of her own. I co-signed because I knew the market and I knew my daughter. Fingers stained with paint Raina, emotion first Raina, who could sell a condo by lighting the right candle and telling a buyer, "Don't you feel Thanksgiving here?" I also knew how fragile a dream can be when cash flow tightens for 3 months and your confidence breaks for 6. I set the mortgage up through a family trust. My lawyer Irene rolled her eyes at me for being extra cautious. So the deed sat under the trust with Raina as the primary beneficiary and me as trustee. We built in conditions: automatic equity increases as she hit business revenue goals, a timeline to transfer control by 35, clear language about co-ownership changes requiring my written consent. It protected her from her worst impulses and strangers' best lies. It kept the roof steady overhead. What I didn't know was how quickly the right man could convince her that my protection was actually prison. The first time Raina brought Devon over, he had hands too clean to match the stories he told. He talked easy about flips and wholesaling deals, about leveraging OPM, like he invented other people's money, about a podcast he recorded in a rented co-working room with neon signs on the wall. When he stood up, he touched Raina's shoulder the way men do in videos, gentle, reassuring, proprietary. "I like him," Raina said that night, pulling one of my throw blankets up to her chin like she did when she was 7. "He listens." "He talks," I said, washing wine glasses. "Listening is different." Subscribe now or risk becoming the mother nobody invites to life's most important moments. Because what I didn't realize then was that Devon wasn't just courting my daughter. He was studying the trust that protected her home. 6 months in, he moved into her bungalow temporarily, while his apartment finished renovations that never seemed to end. He changed light bulbs, ordered tile samples. I watched him at dinner, watched how he deferred when I asked direct questions about taxes and titles, but went long when I asked how he and Raina met, what they were dreaming about, whether they liked the beets I roasted too long. He brought his mother to Sunday dinner one time. Loretta Banks wore silk, smelled like gardenias, and had a tightness to her smile that said, "Of course we belong here." She talked a lot about family, about blood being thicker than water and how mothers pass down faith, about how she couldn't wait to formally have Raina as a daughter. She never asked me what I did for a living. She did ask whether our trust complicated things, in that tone people use when they've already decided the answer is yes. "We like things neat," Loretta said, dabbing her lip with my linen napkin. "No loose ends in marriage." "Neat is an overstatement for anything involving love," I said. "We like things clear." Raina squeezed my knee under the table. "Mom." I let it go that night. You pick your battles with your child's budding life. You do not win her by winning arguments she hasn't asked you to fight. But something in Loretta's eyes told me she was already mapping the quickest route to what wasn't hers. Not subscribed. Your daughter's future husband might count on that weakness. Protect her legacy. Because I had no idea that a month later, my world would collapse with a single phone call. The Wednesday morning it happened, I was at my desk reviewing a loan application. My break came at 10:15, and I called Raina like I always did. "You and Devon been talking about dates?" I didn't mean to sound nosy. But I also didn't mean to be blindsided by a ceremony in an orchard on a Tuesday in November, if that was where this was heading. She laughed. Not a happy laugh. A laugh like a lid snapping onto a container. "Oh, we tied the knot last weekend. Just for real family." Where were you watching from when you heard those words cut through someone you love? Would you have had the strength to keep your voice steady when your heart was breaking apart in your chest? I remember the first time I realized being a mother meant protecting someone who couldn't see the danger. Raina was 4, reaching for a pot handle on the stove. I grabbed her wrist before she could touch it, and she cried, not from pain, but because she didn't understand why I'd stopped her. That moment taught me everything about raising a child. Sometimes their tears are the price of their safety. Those early years in our Masterson Avenue duplex were a tightrope walk between making ends meet and making memories. The place wasn't much: peeling wallpaper in the bathroom, kitchen cabinets that never quite closed, a backyard the size of a postage stamp. But it was ours. I painted Raina's room lavender when she was 6 because she said it was the color of thinking. I hung curtains I sewed myself from fabric on clearance. I planted that lilac bush even though the landlord said it wouldn't take. Every month, I'd sit at our scratched kitchen table after Raina went to bed, calculator in hand, moving numbers around like puzzle pieces that never quite fit. Mortgage, utilities, groceries, school supplies, dance class, because she lit up when she moved. I'd slice my own budget thinner and thinner. No haircut this month, shoes can wait, lunch from home instead of the credit union cafeteria, so she never had to feel the weight I carried. Nights when Andre should have been there but wasn't, I'd call my mother just to hear her voice. He sent money for Raina's birthday, I'd say, not mentioning it was 2 months late and half what he promised. My mother would click her tongue. Denise, when are you going to stop making excuses for that man? I wasn't making excuses. I was creating a narrative where Raina was loved by 2 parents, even if one showed it from a distance too far to feel. I was protecting her from the knowledge that sometimes love isn't enough to make someone stay. Only subscribers understand the red flags I'm showing you. Others miss them completely. Because what I didn't realize was that I was teaching Raina that love looks like sacrifice without boundaries. I was setting her up to mistake control for care. By the time Raina was 15, I'd climbed from teller to loan officer at the credit union. Our financial breathing room expanded inch by precious inch. I started a small investment account, just $50 a month at first, then $100, then more as promotions came. Not for retirement. For Raina's future, for the day she'd need a foundation. When she graduated college and her interior styling business took off, I watched her Instagram following grow from hundreds to thousands. Clients started calling, wanting her eye, her talent for making empty rooms tell stories. She'd come home buzzing with excitement, showing me before and after photos on her phone, telling me about the people who hired her, how they gasped when they saw what she'd done. You could do this full-time, I told her. Build something that's all yours. I need a real studio space, she said. Somewhere to stage mock-ups, meet clients. Not just coffee shops. That's when the idea of the house came. Not just an apartment, but a home with enough space for her to grow her business. A foundation. Security. The thing I'd been saving for all those years. I went to Irene, my lawyer friend from church, and laid out what I was thinking. I want to help my daughter buy a house, but I want it protected. Not because I don't trust her. Because I don't trust the world to be kind to her dreams. Irene nodded, understanding immediately. A family trust. You as trustee, Raina as beneficiary. The house belongs to the trust, not directly to either of you. You can set conditions for transfer of ownership over time. Exactly, I said. I want her to have roots, but I want them planted in soil nobody can take from her. Think your family is safe? Non-subscribers learn these lessons too late. Because I didn't know then that the trust one created to protect my daughter would become the target of someone who saw it as an obstacle to overcome. The day we closed on Raina's bungalow, 3 bedrooms, a sunroom perfect for displays, a yard with mature trees, she cried. Real tears, shoulders shaking, mascara running. Mom, I never thought I'd have something this beautiful. I held her, my grown daughter, still light in my arms. This is your foundation, I whispered. Build whatever you want on it. For a year, everything was perfect. Raina's business flourished. The house transformed under her touch, walls coming down to create flow, vintage fixtures replacing builder-grade, a palette of colors that changed with the light. Her Instagram followers doubled, then tripled. Clients started coming from neighboring states. Then Devin appeared in her posts. Just in the background at first, a hand passing her a coffee, a laugh off camera. Then in her stories, then featured prominently. My biggest supporter, she captioned one photo. He was handsome in that polished way that takes daily maintenance. Strong jawline, eyes that smiled on command, hair with just enough product to look effortless. The first time they came to dinner at my place, I noticed his watch, expensive, but not old money expensive. New money. Showy money. He talked about real estate plays and passive income streams, and how he was building a personal brand. All those words people use when they want you to think they've already arrived somewhere they're still trying to reach. But the thing that caught my attention most were his hands. Manicured nails. No calluses. No scars or burns from actual work. Hands that had never installed drywall or fixed a leaking pipe or done any of the renovations he claimed expertise in. So you're flipping houses? I asked directly over dessert. Among other ventures, he replied, smile never wavering. The market's hot. I've got 3 deals closing next month. Which neighborhoods? I asked, because in my job, I knew every block's values, trends, foreclosure rates. Oh, all over, he said vaguely. I diversify. Subscribe now or miss how I spotted what most mothers overlook until it's too late. Because when someone won't answer direct questions with direct information, they're hiding something. Usually from themselves as much as from you. As weeks passed, Devon became a fixture. He moved in temporarily, while his apartment underwent renovations. He rearranged Raina's furniture when she wasn't home, claiming spaces like a cat marking territory. And then he brought his mother to Sunday dinner. Loretta Banks entered my home like she was doing it a favor by being there. Designer bag, shoes that matched exactly, jewelry that caught the light at every turn of her wrist. She hugged Raina too long and me too briefly. She called me honey instead of my name. Throughout dinner, she kept steering conversation back to family traditions and legacies. She asked Raina about children with the persistence of someone ticking items off a list. And then, over coffee, she turned those calculating eyes to me. Denise, Raina tells me you have some sort of arrangement with the house? Her voice lilted up like she was asking about a recipe, not probing for financial details. A family trust, I said simply. It protects the investment. She murmured, cup halfway to her lips. Sounds complicated. We like things neat in our family. No loose ends in marriage. The word marriage hung in the air like smoke. Raina hadn't mentioned engagement. Devon's face remained neutral, but something flickered in his eyes. A quick glance at his mother, a silent communication that made my skin prickle. Neat is an overstatement for anything involving love, I replied, meeting Loretta's gaze directly. We like things clear. Raina squeezed my knee under the table. Mom, she whispered, a warning. But as I looked between Loretta's practiced smile and Devon's 2 clean hands, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was watching the opening moves of a game where the rules hadn't been explained to everyone at the table. And my daughter's foundation was the prize they were playing for. Have you ever felt that chill when you realize someone is measuring the locks on your doors, looking for the one that might give way with the right pressure? Where are you watching from? Are you seeing the warning signs I missed before it was too late? That Wednesday morning phone call replays in my mind like a broken record, each skip another stab to my heart. I stood in my office, sunlight streaming through the blinds, casting prison bar shadows across my desk as my daughter's words hung in the air. We tied the knot last weekend. Just for real family. My throat closed so tight I thought I might never speak again. My fingers went numb against the phone. 25 years of love, of 3 a.m. fevers and hand-sewn Halloween costumes, of college tuition checks and midnight anxiety calls, reduced to 5 casual words, just for real family. Where? I managed, my voice a stranger's. Who was there? Devon's pasta, she answered, breezy as a summer day. Loretta. His cousin. We wanted it intimate. You always said weddings get out of control. I said money gets out of control, I corrected, each word measured careful. I didn't say cut your mother. It's not that, she said quickly. We wanted peace. You ask so many questions, Anne. Every unsubscribed mother risks being cut from her daughter's most precious moments. Because what I couldn't articulate then was that questions are how mothers keep their children safe. Questions are the invisible shield we hold up against a world that doesn't always have their best interests at heart. I couldn't cry, not yet. Something cold and clear was crystallizing behind my shock, a certainty that this wasn't just about a wedding. This was about isolation. This was about removing the one person who might question what was happening. Where's your certificate? I asked, because details matter when foundations shift. In the mail, she said, already done with this conversation. We're doing brunch with Loretta this weekend to celebrate. Maybe we can plan a thing with you later. Don't make this a thing, okay? I'm happy. Isn't that the point? Her words hit my ribs like an elbow. I swallowed and made my face calm, like I used to do when she scraped a knee and looked at my reaction before deciding whether to cry. Congratulations, I said. The syllables felt like pebbles in my mouth. I hope the real family told you how a mortgage works. She sighed. There it is. Bye, Mom. Love you. The line clicked dead like a door that used to stick and suddenly didn't anymore. After we hung up, I didn't go to the bathroom to cry. I didn't call a friend. I sat still as stone, feeling the hurt bloom like a bruise spreading under my skin. My body knew before my mind fully grasped it. This wasn't just my daughter excluding me from a ceremony. This was Devin and Loretta executing a plan. The timing wasn't accidental. 3 weeks earlier, Raina had mentioned casually that Devin was helping her reorganize their finances. 2 days before that, Loretta had called asking pointed questions about how exactly the trust was structured. I'd given vague answers, feeling protective without knowing exactly why. Now I knew. A wedding without witnesses who might raise questions. A quick ceremony with only his people present. A mother-in-law who had asked about loose ends. Subscribers know exactly what to do when family betrays them. Will you be prepared? Because in that moment of crushing pain, my training as a loan officer became my armor. When emotions flood, facts become your lifeline. I walked to the back office, closed the door, and logged into the trust accounts. My hand hovered over the autopay settings for a long, long time. Not out of indecision, but because I wanted to be sure my actions came from clarity, not hurt. This wasn't about punishment. This was about protection. This was about creating a consequence that would force transparency. This was about showing my daughter that exclusion works both ways. If I wasn't real family enough to witness her vows, perhaps I wasn't real family enough to keep carrying financial responsibility without question. I thought about Harold, my father, who taught me that love without respect isn't love at all. Denise, he'd say, people will take what you give until you show them you're keeping count. I was keeping count now. I clicked suspend on the mortgage autopay. The screen asked me if I was sure. For one breath, I hesitated, seeing Raina as a 5-year-old with skinned knees, as a teenager crying over her first heartbreak, as a college graduate throwing her cap in the air. Then I remembered her laugh when she said real family, and I clicked confirm. Not to hurt. To inform. Not to punish. To protect. Not out of spite. Out of strategy. I closed my laptop and finally let the tears come. They fell hot and fast, but not for long. I had work to do, calls to make, information to gather. Because something wasn't right about this rushed wedding with no mother present, and I intended to find out what Devin and Loretta were hiding. Subscribe now or remain defenseless when those you love most exclude you. Because what happened next would test every boundary I'd ever set, every principle I'd ever held, and every ounce of love I had for my only child. Do you know what it feels like to be cut from the most important day of your child's life? Have you ever had to choose between letting hurt consume you and channeling it into action? Where are you watching from, and would you have had the strength to push that button, knowing the storm it would bring? 3 days passed. 3 days of silence that felt louder than screaming. 3 days of me going through motions at work, of checking records at the county clerk's office during lunch breaks, of calling in favors from colleagues who owed me professional courtesies. Then my phone exploded with notifications. First text, 8:17 a.m., Mom, the mortgage payment is late. Second text, 8:19 a.m., they called us. Third text, 8:22 a.m., this affects our credit score, Mom. First voicemail, 8:36 a.m., Mom, why aren't you answering? The mortgage company called. They said the payment's late. Devon's freaking out. Call me. By 9:15, she'd called 4 more times. Each message more frantic than the last. I let them all go to voicemail while I finished my morning appointments. Not out of cruelty. Out of necessity. I needed her full attention for what came next. When I finally called back at my lunch break, her voice was shrill with fear and accusation. Why would you do that? Do you know how that makes us look? I took a breath and spoke with deliberate calm. Oh? I thought you knew. Knew what? The edge in her voice could have cut glass. That real family handles their own mortgage payments. Silence stretched between us like a tightrope. Then, Mom, please. We can't. Devon's trying to consolidate our finances, and this throws everything off. Can you please just? I'll be there at 6. I ended the call. Unsubscribed women lose their homes to men like this every single day. Because what my daughter didn't know, what she couldn't see through the fog of her rushed marriage, was that I'd spent those 3 silent days tracking down exactly who Devon Banks really was. Driving to their bungalow that evening, I felt strangely calm. The folder beside me contained everything I'd discovered: the quitclaim deed form filed with the county but not yet processed, the background check revealing 2 previous marriages Devon had never mentioned, and most damning, court records of a pending child support hearing scheduled for next month. Their home glowed from within as I pulled into the driveway. The bungalow looked like a magazine spread, new shutters painted sage green, copper planters flanking the door, landscape lighting illuminating the mature trees. All of it purchased with Raina's hard work and my financial foundation. Devon answered the door, all smiles and expensive cologne. Denise, he said warmly, as if nothing had happened. Come in, come in. We were just talking about you. The living room had been transformed since my last visit. New furniture, art I didn't recognize, a bar cart stocked with top-shelf liquor. Raina stood by the fireplace, arms crossed tight against her chest. Mom, this isn't necessary, she started, but I raised my hand. First, congratulations on your wedding. I hope it was everything you wanted. I set my purse down carefully. Second, I'm here to discuss why your new husband filed a quitclaim deed attempting to remove the trust's ownership of this house without my knowledge or consent. Devon's smile flickered but held. There must be some misunderstanding. Raina and I were just organizing our assets now that we're married. Assets require ownership, I said, pulling the first document from my folder. This house belongs to the Holloway Family Trust, not to Raina individually. She can't sign it over to you, and you can't add your name to a deed that isn't hers to modify. Raina's eyes widened. What is she talking about, Devon? Without subscriber support, I couldn't share these protection strategies that saved my daughter. Because in that moment, watching confusion bloom on my child's face, I knew she had no idea what he tried to do. He filed paperwork to transfer the house from the trust into both your names, I explained gently. Which he can't legally do. Which is why I suspended the mortgage payment, to create a paper trail of my active involvement before this went any further. Devon's charm evaporated like morning dew. This is ridiculous. You're trying to control your adult daughter. The trust was a temporary arrangement. The trust has clear conditions for transfer, I interrupted, none of which have been met. And none of which include marriage to someone with 2 previous divorces and a pending child support hearing in Fulton County. The color drained from his face. Raina stepped back, hand flying to her mouth. What child support hearing? She whispered. For his 3-year-old son, I said softly. With his second ex-wife. Devon's jaw hardened. You had no right to dig into my personal business. You made it my business when you tried to steal my daughter's home. I turned to Raina. Honey, did you know about his child? His ex-wives? Did you know he's missed 8 consecutive support payments? Tears welled in her eyes, but before she could answer, the doorbell rang. Perfect timing. All 3 of us froze. That would be for you, I said to Devon. The process server I asked to meet us here. If you're watching without subscribing, you've already decided your family's protection isn't worth 1 click. Because what happened next showed exactly why mothers need to be in the room when decisions are made about their children's futures. Raina opened the door with trembling hands. The man outside wore a neutral expression and carried a manila envelope. Devon Banks? He asked, looking past her to where Devon stood, face twisted with rage. You've been served, the man said, extending the envelope. Child Support Enforcement Hearing, Fulton County Family Court. Raina's eyes met mine across the room, confused, hurt, but with the first spark of understanding lighting them from within. The scales were falling, the fog lifting. And in that moment, I knew my daughter was finally seeing what I'd seen all along. Have you ever watched someone you love realize they've been deceived? Where are you watching from, and would you know how to save them from the ruins of that realization? The night Devon was served those papers, he didn't come home. Raina sat on her living room floor, surrounded by all those perfectly curated things, and sobbed until her voice gave out. I held her like I hadn't since she was small, my back against the couch, her head in my lap, my fingers combing through her hair. How did I not see it? She kept asking between gasps. How did I miss all of it? Because he didn't want you to see, I told her. Because that was the whole point. When dawn broke through the windows, she looked up at me with swollen eyes. The wedding, she whispered. I need to tell you about the wedding. The ceremony had been quick. No white dress, no flowers, just Loretta's pastor friend saying words in her living room. No license that Raina had signed, Devon had handled the paperwork after. No ring for him, though he'd given her one. Just a rushed exchange of vows with Loretta recording on her phone, followed by Devon saying they should keep it off social media, until they could have a real ceremony later. I don't think I'm actually married, she said, voice hollow. Am I? The next morning, we went to the county clerk's office together. Raina wore sunglasses indoors, chin high despite everything. The clerk searched her computer, checked again when she found nothing, then shook her head. No marriage license has been filed for Devon Banks and Raina Holloway in the past 6 months, she confirmed. In any county in this state. Raina's knees buckled. I caught her elbow, steadying her. Thank you, I told the clerk. And to my daughter, let's go home. Non-subscribers risk signing away their children's future without even knowing it. Because what Devon and Loretta had orchestrated wasn't just exclusion, it was fraud. A fake ceremony to make Raina believe she was legally bound, followed by pressure to consolidate assets that weren't hers to give. They wanted the house, Raina said that night, sitting at my kitchen table, hands wrapped around a mug of tea. All of it, the questions about the trust, the rush to marry keeping you away, it was all about the house. And the equity in it, I added gently. Almost $200,000 worth. She flinched. I was so stupid. No, I said firmly. You were loved in a way that made you vulnerable. There's a difference. The next day brought another surprise. My phone lit up with a name I hadn't seen in months. Andre. Raina's father. Heard our girl's in trouble, he said when I answered. No hello, no small talk. Just straight to the heart of things, like always. How did you hear that? I asked. Mutual friends. Word travels. She okay? I hesitated. Getting there. Good. He paused. You tell her yet about my part in the trust? My breath caught. No. Maybe it's time. Still watching without subscribing? What other protection strategies are you willing to miss? Because there are layers to protection that even those closest to us don't always see. That evening, I sat Raina down at my kitchen table, the same one where I'd moved those puzzle piece numbers around all those years ago. There's something you should know about the trust, I began. About the initial down payment for your house. Her eyes widened as I explained. How Andre, for all his absences, had been sending money, not directly to us, but to an account I'd set up. Not regularly, not reliably, but substantial amounts when he could. How I'd invested it carefully over the years. How, when it came time for the house down payment, nearly half had come from those investments. Dad helped buy my house? Tears filled her eyes. Why didn't you tell me? Because he asked me not to, I said simply. He didn't want credit. He wanted security for you. She shook her head, trying to absorb this new reality where her father's love had been present in ways she couldn't see. Where protection came from unexpected places. That's why the trust was so important, I continued. It wasn't just my money to protect. It was his contribution too. Our joint promise to give you a foundation no one could take away. 2 days later, we faced Loretta. Not at her immaculate home with its matching furniture sets, but at a coffee shop of my choosing, neutral ground, public, with exits I'd mentally mapped the moment we walked in. She arrived 10 minutes late, sliding into the booth with practiced grace. Denise, she nodded coolly. Then, softer, Raina, honey. Where's Devon? I asked. Her smile tightened. Handling some business in Atlanta. Avoiding his court date, you mean, Raina said, voice stronger than I'd heard in days. Loretta's eyes flashed. You don't understand his situation. I understand exactly what you both tried to do, Raina replied. The fake wedding. The trust paperwork. All of it. I placed a folder on the table between us. We've filed a report with the county prosecutor about the fraudulent attempt to transfer the deed. We've documented the fake ceremony. We've spoken to both of Devon's ex-wives. Loretta's perfectly manicured hand trembled as she reached for her water. You're overreacting. Devon loves Raina. He just has a complicated past. He has a child he's abandoned, I corrected. And my daughter is not going to be his third ex-wife, because there was never a legal marriage to begin with. We know everything, Raina added. About the other properties. The bankruptcies. The liens. Everything. Something shifted in Loretta's expression then, the mask of confident control cracking just enough to reveal something unexpected underneath. Not malice. Fear. You don't understand, she said, voice suddenly smaller. Devon's been in trouble since his father left. I was just trying to help him get stable. This house, your trust, it was going to give him a fresh start. At my daughter's expense, I said. Loretta looked down at her hands. I didn't see it that way. That's exactly the problem, Raina said. You didn't see me at all. Subscribe now, your daughter might need these exact strategies next month. Because predators don't arrive with warning signs. They come bearing gifts and promises and explanations that sound reasonable until you examine them in the light. As we left the coffee shop, Raina walking tall beside me, she squeezed my hand. "I'm sorry I said you weren't real family," she whispered. "You're the only real thing I've got." "Not the only real thing," I corrected gently. "Just the most stubborn." That night, as we sat on my porch swing, the same one where I'd read her bedtime stories and bandaged scraped knees, she asked the question I'd been waiting for. How do I trust again? After this? I looked at my beautiful, wounded, resilient daughter and thought carefully before answering. Because some lessons cost too much to be simplified, and some healing requires more than platitudes. You learn the difference, I said finally, between control disguised as love and protection born from respect. Neither of us knew then that the next day would bring another unexpected visitor to my door. One whose arrival would challenge everything we thought we understood about family, forgiveness, and the foundation we were trying to rebuild. Where are you watching from? Have you ever had to reconstruct trust after it's been shattered? Would you know how to separate the truth from the convenient lies we tell ourselves about the people we love? The unexpected visitor who arrived the next morning was Andre. Not just his name on my phone, but his actual self, 6'2" frame filling my doorway, gray threading his temples now, the same warm eyes that had once made me believe in forever. "Heard our girl needed both her parents," he said simply. Raina froze when she saw him, then threw herself into his arms like she was 7 again. I watched them from the kitchen, her shoulders shaking, his hand patting her back awkwardly but steadily. Some wounds need more than one kind of healing. Later, the three of us sat at my dining room table with papers spread between us, the trust documents, mortgage statements, credit reports. A family conference unlike any we'd had before. "First thing," I said, placing my hand on the mortgage statement, "we're restoring the autopay. But with changes." Raina nodded, eyes clearer than they'd been in days. "I want to contribute more. Not just rely on the trust." "Second thing," Andre added, surprising me, "you need to understand every line on every document that has your name on it. No more letting someone else handle the paperwork." Unsubscribed mothers leave their daughters financially vulnerable to predators. Because what we were doing wasn't just fixing a financial mess, we were rebuilding my daughter's relationship with her own power. Over the next 3 weeks, we established a new rhythm. Mornings, Raina would come to my house before work. We'd sit at the table with coffee and financial statements, going line by line. I taught her what I'd learned in 20 years at the credit union. How to read the fine print, how to track where money flowed, how to protect assets not just with legal structures but with knowledge. "I can't believe I never asked these questions before," she said one morning, reviewing her credit report. "I just assumed that someone else would handle it." I finished gently. She nodded, shame clouding her eyes. "That's what predators count on," I told her. "Not just financial ones. All kinds. They count on you being too embarrassed to ask questions, too trusting to verify answers, too worried about seeming difficult to stand your ground." Some afternoons, Andre would join us. He'd never been good with money himself, one of our many friction points during our brief marriage, but he was trying now, asking questions I'd never heard from him before. Learning alongside his daughter. "I should have taught you this stuff years ago," he told Raina. "Instead of just sending money to your mom and thinking that was enough." Raina's eyes welled up. "You were helping in ways I didn't know." "Not enough ways," he said quietly. "Not the most important ones. Every day you watch without subscribing, another daughter loses her inheritance. Because protection isn't just about money, it's about equipping our children with the tools to protect themselves when we can't be there." The bungalow stood empty for 2 weeks after everything happened. Raina couldn't bear to sleep there, not with Devon's clothes still in the closet, his expensive cologne lingering in the bathroom. Then one Saturday, she asked for my help. I need to reclaim my space, she said. Make it mine again. We spent the weekend clearing out every trace of him, donating his abandoned clothes, replacing the bedding, rearranging furniture. I taught her how to sage a room, an old ritual my grandmother had passed down. Not because it's magic, I explained, but because intention matters when you're healing a space. As we worked, she told me Devin had tried calling several times. He says he can explain everything, that it wasn't what it looked like. And what do you say back? I asked carefully. She met my eyes steadily. Nothing. I don't answer. That night, sitting on her back porch with paint in our hair and takeout containers between us, she showed me her phone. She'd archived all the photos of Devin from her Instagram, removed every mention of him. In his place was a new post, just her, standing in front of her freshly painted front door, keys in hand. The caption read, "Reclaiming what's mine. Grateful for foundations that can't be stolen. #lessons learned #thank you mom. I'm thinking of starting a series," she said hesitantly. Financial literacy for creative women. The things I wish I'd known. I squeezed her hand. That's how healing works best. When you transform your wound into someone else's warning. 3 days later, Loretta called. Not Raina's phone, mine. Her voice sounded smaller than I remembered. Is she okay? She asked without preamble. She's getting there, I answered cautiously. Good. A pause. Devin's in treatment. For his issues. With money and women and truth. Another pause. I wanted her to know I'm sorry. For my part in it. I'll tell her, I said. The trust was smart, Loretta added, surprising me. I should have done something like that for Devin years ago. Maybe he wouldn't have. She trailed off. Protection only works when it teaches, not when it enables, I said. It wasn't meant as a jab, just a truth I'd learned the hard way myself. Yes, she said softly. I see that now. Subscribe now, or accept that you're choosing ignorance over your family's protection. Because the lessons I'm sharing weren't learned in comfort. They were forged in the fire of near disaster. In the moment I almost lost my daughter to someone who saw her trust as a weakness to exploit. A month after everything fell apart, Raina came to Sunday dinner at my house. She brought fresh flowers, her famous mac and cheese, and something I hadn't seen in weeks, a genuine smile that reached her eyes. As we washed dishes side by side, she bumped my hip with hers. The mortgage payment went through automatically yesterday. From my account this time. Pride bloomed in my chest. How did that feel? Scary, she admitted. But good scary. Like I'm standing on my own. Not entirely on your own, I reminded her. The trust is still there. Just differently. She nodded, understanding the distinction. Protection with education. Support with agency. Love with respect. What neither of us could have predicted was the phone call that would come the next morning. A call that would test every boundary we'd so carefully reconstructed, and force us to decide what family really means when the lines between protection and forgiveness blur beyond recognition. Have you ever rebuilt something that was broken, only to find the real test comes after the repairs? Where are you watching from? And would you recognize the difference between a second chance and a second deception? The call that came the next morning was from Devin's treatment center. Not from him directly, he wasn't allowed outside contact yet, but from his counselor, asking if Raina would consider being part of his recovery process. Family sessions, they called it. As if what had happened between them was a misunderstanding rather than a calculated deception. Raina came to me that evening, her face a storm of conflicting emotions. What do I do? She asked, sitting cross-legged on my living room floor like she used to as a child working on puzzles too complex for her age. Part of me wants to tell them to go to hell. But another part wants answers, I finished. Wants to understand how someone you loved could hurt you so deliberately. She nodded, tears gathering. Does that make me weak? I thought carefully before answering. It makes you human. The question isn't whether to seek understanding. It's whether you can do it without putting yourself at risk again. That conversation opened something between us, a deeper level of honesty than we'd ever shared before. As spring warmed into summer, as Raina's business flourished again and her financial independence grew stronger, we began talking about the lessons beneath the lessons. The wisdom that comes only after you've survived the storm. I keep thinking about what real family actually means, she said one evening as we sat on my back porch. Devin and Loretta used that phrase like a weapon. People often do, I said. They use family to mean those who won't question me. But real family is something else entirely. What is it to you? She asked. I watched fireflies beginning to dot the darkening yard. Real family are the people who love you enough to tell you hard truths. Who protect without controlling. Who see you clearly, flaws and all, and stay anyway. Only subscribers can truly protect their daughters from financial predators. Because the lessons I'm sharing aren't just about one man's deception. They're about recognizing the patterns that repeat across generations when we don't learn to distinguish love from manipulation. I keep wondering if I'll ever trust again, Raina admitted one afternoon as we worked on her new financial literacy series. Not just men. Anyone. Trust isn't something you give blindly, I told her. It's something you build carefully, with boundaries and verification. Think of it like a house. You don't move in before the foundation is solid. She smiled at the metaphor. Like my actual house. Exactly like your house, I agreed. The trust didn't prevent you from having a home. It prevented someone from taking it from you when you were vulnerable. That's when the biggest lesson crystallized for both of us. Protection without education creates dependency. Education without protection risks devastation. The balance between them is where dignity lives. Raina decided not to participate in Devin's treatment program. Instead, she wrote him a letter, not of forgiveness, but of release. I'm not responsible for your healing, she wrote. And you're not entitled to mine. Her social media series on financial literacy for creative women took off, each post more confident than the last. She shared parts of our story, carefully edited for privacy but raw in emotional truth. Women responded by the hundreds, then thousands, sharing their own stories of financial manipulation and the lessons they'd learned too late. Not subscribing means choosing ignorance when your family needs your wisdom most. Because the patterns that nearly destroyed my daughter's foundation are happening right now in homes across this country, to women who don't know they're in danger until it's almost too late. One night in late summer, I came home to find Raina in my kitchen, music playing, something delicious simmering on the stove. She'd used her key without telling me she was coming. A simple act of belonging that meant more than any words could express. What's all this? I asked, setting down my bag. Celebration, she said, handing me a glass of wine. The trust amendment went through today. I'm officially the managing trustee now, with you as backup. Pride swelled in my chest. Not because she was taking control, but because she'd chosen to do it the right way, learning every aspect of the responsibility before assuming it, maintaining the protection while growing beyond it. To foundations, I said, raising my glass. And the women who build them, she finished. As we cooked together, Marvin Gaye playing low in the background, she bumped my hip with hers in our old kitchen dance. I twirled her once, twice, her laughter filling spaces in my heart I hadn't realized were empty. You know what I realized? She said as we sat down to eat. Every time I've really messed up in my life, I was trying to solve a problem you'd already offered to help with. That's growing up, I told her. Having to learn some lessons for yourself. But not all lessons, she countered. Some are too expensive to learn firsthand. Would you leave your daughter defenseless? Subscribe now or explain why in comments. Because the wisdom I'm sharing cost nearly everything my daughter and I had built together, and I'm offering it to you at the price of a single click. After dinner, as we washed dishes side by side, Raina turned to me with eyes clear and direct. Thank you, she said quietly. For what, specifically? I asked, smiling. For holding the line, she answered. For not giving in when I was mad at you. For seeing what I couldn't see and protecting me anyway. She took my soapy hands in hers. For being real family when I didn't know what that meant. I pulled her close, this beautiful woman who had once been my tiny, fierce girl. That's the thing about real family, I whispered against her hair. We hold the line not because it's easy, but because what's on the other side matters too much to surrender. What neither of us knew then was that the line we'd held so carefully was about to be tested once more. This time not by deception, but by an unexpected opportunity that would force us to decide whether the wisdom we'd earned could be applied to something more complex than protection. Whether healing could extend beyond survival into something like grace. Are you watching closely enough to see the difference between weakness and wisdom, between vulnerability and strength? Where are you in your own story of protection and truth? And would you recognize the moment when holding the line becomes holding someone up instead of holding them back? The unexpected opportunity came 6 months later, in the form of Loretta standing on my doorstep, holding a small photo album and looking nothing like the polished, intimidating woman I'd first met. May I come in? She asked, her voice lacking its usual precision. I hesitated, then stepped aside. Some conversations deserve the dignity of privacy, even when trust hasn't been earned. That conversation changed everything, not because it erased what happened, but because it revealed the layers beneath it. Loretta showed me photos of Devin as a child, of the father who'd abandoned them, of the patterns that had repeated across generations. Not as excuses, but as context. He's completed treatment, she said finally. He wants to make amends to Raina. Real ones, not manipulative ones. That's her decision, I replied. Not mine. When I told Raina about Loretta's visit, she was quiet for a long time. I don't know if I can forgive him, she said finally. Forgiveness isn't the point, I told her. Boundaries are. You can acknowledge someone's growth without giving them access to your life again. The wisdom we'd earned wasn't just about protection, it was about discernment. About knowing the difference between second chances and second vulnerabilities. About recognizing that healing sometimes happens across distance rather than through closeness. I'm telling you this story because somewhere in your life right now, there's someone whose foundation you're either strengthening or undermining. Maybe it's your daughter. Maybe it's your mother. Maybe it's yourself. Not subscribing means choosing to remain vulnerable, just like Raina before I stepped in. Because these patterns of manipulation don't announce themselves with warning signs. They arrive dressed as love, as opportunity, as family values. Ask yourself, who in your life questions your financial decisions? Do you receive those questions as control or as protection? Who celebrates your independence and who seems threatened by it? Who encourages verification and who dismisses it as distrust? Real protection isn't about keeping someone dependent. It's about equipping them with the tools to stand on their own. It's about teaching them to read the fine print, to trust their instincts, to recognize when I'm doing this for your own good really means I'm doing this for my own benefit. Every subscriber gains protection strategies. Non-subscribers remain easy targets. Because the difference between my daughter's story ending in loss versus triumph wasn't luck. It was preparation meeting opportunity. It was boundaries enforced with love but without compromise. The most important thing I've learned through all of this is that dignity isn't something anyone can give you or take from you. It's something you claim for yourself by holding the line between what you'll accept and what you won't, not out of rigidity, but out of self-respect. The most dangerous mother is one who doesn't subscribe to learn these warning signs. Because the greatest gift we can give our children isn't protection from pain. It's the capacity to protect themselves when we're not there to do it for them. That's what real family means. Not just being there for the wedding, but being there for the aftermath, whether you're invited or not. Standing in the gap between vulnerability and exploitation. Holding the line even when it costs you temporary peace for the sake of permanent protection. Final warning: subscribe now or accept full responsibility when family manipulation happens to you. Because somewhere in your life, someone is already testing your boundaries, measuring your resistance, looking for the loose threads in your protection. The only question is whether you'll see it before or after they've already begun to pull. Where are you watching from? And what line will you hold today?